Okay, thank you. Thanks, Irene, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here in the EBD for a very long time. The last talk I gave here, I think it was about 15 years or so in the other building. And also thank you to the Integrative Ecology Group for the invitation and for hosting meeting in Doñana. It has been a real pleasure to stay there. And thank you all of you for coming today. Well, the idea of this talk is to give you what is my main idea of how generalist interaction may evolve. I'm going to focus on pollination because that is my main topic of study, but you can think about this talk just on any kind of facultative interaction, say dispersal or synzoochory or any type of interaction. Okay, I'm going to focus on pollination, but it's just my idea about how a generalist system can evolve. Well, we all know that pollinators play a key role in the evolution of plant traits. It may affect, for example, the microevolution of plant acting as agent of natural selection and provoking phenotypic adaptation. And also, they also can trigger the speciation of many species acting at the intermediate level between micro and macroevolution, being the main driver of new ecotypes and species of plants. And at the higher level of macroevolution, pollinator can also lead the taxonomic and phenotypic diversification of many plant clades. These processes have been studied quite a lot with many types of plants, mostly plants interacting with few pollinator functional groups, something that we call in evolutionary ecology a specialist interaction. This is just an example how it can work. You have different type of pollinator that are coded by different colors, and you see that each single species of plant, this is a genus, is pollinated by only one single functional group of pollinator. Using techniques of micro and macro evolution, you can track the evolution of different pollination niche along the phylogeny and how this shift between different pollination niche are associated with these diversification processes or changing in phenotype and so on. But what happens with those systems in which each single plant species is pollinated or is interacting with really many species of pollinator, the generalist or multi-specific system? Is there any possibility for phenotypic evolution to occur in this kind of multi-specific system? Can the organisms interacting, all of them with the same plant species, exert significant selection on some specific trait? Are the selection collapsing between them? Is there any possibility of coevolution to occur in those systems in which there are more than one single species interacting with the same plant? Is there any possibility of, at the meso scale, local adaptation to occur and even to give rise to different ecotype in this kind of system in which the plant is interacting with a network of organisms? Can generalist interaction mediate speciation and diversification? Is there any significant association between species diversification and type of pollination niche in which all the system is generalist? This question, we have been pursuing this question for a long time. There are no definitive answers yet about this. I'm going to give you what are my ideas. This is more or less the resume of my long career with this kind of system is just giving some idea of how generalist system can evolve. And along the talk, I'm going to give you some marks identifying what is happening with generalization. Well, the first thing we realize when we observe a generalist system is that generalist plants are interacting with networks of pollinators, not with single pollinators. These are a real example with one of my favorite plant group. This is Erysimum. These are different species of Erysimum. This is the phylogenetic relationship between them, and these are functional groups of pollinators, no species. Here, there are about 500 species of pollinators, grouped in different pollinator groups, okay? And you see that there are different frequency of interaction. There are some species interacting mostly with large bees, bee flies, other species interacting with ants, with beetles, and so on. But what we have here is very different. We show in the previous slide with the specialist system. How is possible to study that? We need some kind of tool to study that. Okay. Some time ago, my colleague, my long-term partner, Francisco Perfetti in the genetic department in the University of Granada, and Miguel Verdú, proposed a method to explore the evolution of plant traits or the interaction in a generalist context. It's using modularity, that is a network tool, to identify generalist multidimensional niche. Let's see how this can work. If we have this specialized clade, we have that this species is interacting with one single type of interacting organisms. This is very easy. You can pass from here to here. That is, most people working in a specialized system do is, yes, this is the niche 1, this is the niche 2, and this is the niche 3. Everything is very neat. If you do the modularity analysis, if you convert this in a bipartite network, putting here the plant species and here the interacting organisms, you see that they are linked with completely different group of interacting organisms. And the modularity is perfect. There are 3 modules. Okay? This exercise is vacuous. We don't need to do that because we can pass directly to here. But we have something like this. We can use this tool to make exactly the same bipartite network and identify the modules. And these modules is already something we can use as a proxy of the generalist multidimensional niche of this species. And then, rather than trying to see what is happening using this mess, what we do is just using these modules as a proxy of the niche and see what happened in the evolution of this clade along this niche. Okay? And this is the tool we offer, we suggest to study with generalist system. Then the first generalization mark that is very important is something that I have learned during my time working with generalist system, is that generalist pollination niche are not caused by the exact sharp replacement of major functional group. There are some functional group visiting also, belonging to one niche, visiting also the species of the other niche. The separation between different generalist niche is a quantitative question. It's not something that is sharp like in specialist systems. Okay, this is the first generalization mark. We can use this even to identify niches within a species level, even at the level of the population. We can make a network at the individual level. This is something that we have developed with a student, and now is in Portugal, Javier Valverde, and it's just trying to see what are the individual niche of any of the individuals plant individuals belonging to a population. Some time ago, some people started to think about the possibility of individual specialization within a generalist system or generalist species. Here, what we are finding is that there are not only individual specialization, but also even there are individual generalization. That in a single population of plants, you can find some group of individuals belonging to different generalist niche. They are not becoming more specialists at the level of the individual. They are just generalists to different growth of different assemblages of pollinators. Okay? Then we can use exactly the same tool to identify the niche at the species level and even at the individual level. Okay, with these tools, what I'm going to tell now is how generalist system can evolve at the three different levels: micro, meso, and macroevolutionary level. Starting with the lower level, microevolution in generalist system, I'm going to speak about one specific system I have been working with during the last 2 decades. That is the interaction between Erysimum mediuspanicum, that is a wallflower, it's a Brassicaceae, very common in the east of the Iberian Peninsula, and the very diverse assemblage of pollinators visiting its flowers. More than, you can see here for one single species, more than 500 species belonging to almost 100 families of insects, 7 orders, and if we group that in functional group, at least 16 functional groups. Okay? And the first thing that we found, according to the evolution of the generalization, is that even at the level of the population, you can find different niche within the population. This is an example of one study done during these years in this part of the Sierra Nevada in Granada province. This is a population of plants, and these are the only plants in the population, 100 plants, because we removed the other plant just to be sure that we were working with a certain number of plants, 100. This is the dimension of the plot, is 20 meters by 20 meters. And this is the spatial location of the individual. And if we use the network tools to identify how many generalist niche there are within this population, what we found is the network is modular. They are modular. There are different individuals of plants interacting with different groups of pollinators. In particular, we found 4 modules. And what is important is that the identity of the niche each plant belongs to is related with many different plant traits. The type of flower, the size of the flower, the shape, the color, and other phenotypic traits that a plant is displaying, is related with which niche is belonging to. And this is very important because this is something that allows the evolution of pollination niche at this level. There are some traits that can be related with niche. If there are some niche that are better than other niche because are composed of species that are more effective pollinating, for example, probably natural selection is going to favor those individuals, bearing those traits that make those individuals interacting with this niche. Okay, this is something that is very, very interesting because at the level of the generalization, this relationship between the identity of the niche and the plant phenotype has not been proved before. Something that is also very interesting, and we found that is also very interesting within the context of the generalization, is that pollinator may shape the mating network of the plant. This is because if a given plant is visited by many different pollinators, differing foraging behavior and flight pattern between different plants, different pollinators can move pollen between different groups of plants, creating a population that is genetically structured, making genetic neighborhoods within the population. And for example, here I'm showing you, these are the plants of the population we were studying in Sierra Nevada. These are the spatial location of the plant, and these are I don't know if you can see the gray lines. They are the movement of this type of pollinator between different plants. And you can see that this type of pollinator are moving between this plant more often than between, for example, this plant or this plant. These are the movement of another different type of pollinator, that these are long-term large bees. And these are the type of movement. If we pile all the movement pattern of the 16 functional groups we have found in this population, what we find is that we have something like this. These are the plant reproducing or intercrossing with the other plant. This is a mating network. We found here that some plants are producing seeds from different patterns on individual within the population. In fact, there are about 5 modules of plant intercrossing between them. Then another generalization mark is that pollinator can also mediate a structure or modular mating network. This is very interesting because this means that if we have a chain of pollination niches, because, for example, one of the functional group of niche are lost due to kind of environmental factor, chain or whatever, this structure is telling you that probably is going to happen a chain, a slightly chain of the phenotype of the population from the original type of phenotype to a different type of phenotype, according to the type of niche they are interacting with. Another thing that is important, that is something that not many people believe, is that even in generalist system, pollinator may act as selective agents of plant trait. This has been proved many times. This is just an example of another population of Erysimum medispanicum. You can see here a path dynamic and structural equation modeling in which we have here fitness. We have here the different type of traits, the floral number, plant size, flower size, related with the corolla diameter, different type of phenotypic trait. And these are the pollinators affecting some of those traits. And you can see that there are significant effect of some traits on the fitness at the level of the seed production and even at the level of the juvenile production. This is, for example, the corolla shape that are selected by the pollinator in this population. That is, pollinators, even in generalist system, may act as selective agents. And because in this kind of generalist system, everything is happening within the context of a network, something that we are starting to see that even the position of the plant in the plant pollinator network, within the topology of the network, is selected by natural selection. This is something similar to the scheme shown in the previous slide. We have fitness here, we have the whole phenotype here, we have the effect of the pollinator on the phenotype, and this is some metric of the plant within the plant, the individual base plant pollinator network. And in some cases, not only to have a given phenotype, but also to occupy a given position within the network is selected by natural selection. In this case, in this study that we did in a different population of Erysimum medispanicum in particular, the centrality of the plant within the individual base network was selected by natural selection. It's like a extended phenotype or something like that of the plant. This is something that probably is happening mostly in generalist systems. Then another generalization mark from my point of view is that network position affects fitness in this kind of system. Okay, let's move a little bit up to the next level, the mesoevolution of the evolution at the landscape scale. Well, first thing we need to understand that in a generalist system, different pollinator groups, functional groups, differ in effectiveness. Using the effectiveness framework of quantity, that is the frequency of interaction of a given pollinator with the plant, and quality component, that being this the proportion of seeds produced per single visit or any other way of accounting for quality component, well, we see that different group of pollinators differ in the effectiveness. The effectiveness is made by these isoclines that are connecting this component with this component, these two components being multiplicative. That's the reason why this is the shape of the isoclines. Okay? Here there are many groups of really very low effective pollinators, because whether they are very scarce at the flower or they are really very, very bad pollinators once they have reached a flower, there are many groups of pollinators that behaving really very bad. It's something very common in generalist system, but there are some groups are acting as a good pollinator. But there are many differences. This is something that is typical of generalist system. Here, for example, we see just a curiosity how the effectiveness of some groups, that is in this panel A, can change if we include the genetic diversity of the progeny produced by each single visited by this group. In this case, for example, these short-tongue large bees, the effectiveness increase a little bit when you include the genetic diversity of the progeny produced by a pollination event, and the effectiveness of these long-tongue large bees decreased. Okay, this is just a curiosity. But what is important from this picture is something that I think is happening in most generalization marks. In fact, I think that is quite an evidence of the system you are working with is really a generalist system, and there is no correlation between quantity and quality component of effectiveness. Okay, this is something probably happening in most generalist systems. But also, something that happens in almost every single generalist system is that pollinator differs in preferences for some floral tribe. I did this work with my colleague from Barcelona, Jordi Bosch, and what we found is that offering to the plant different models of different shapes, for example, like here, we obtain differential visitation rates of different groups to different shapes. This is the first choice of this type of pollinator. This is the first choice, and the second choice of this type of pollinator, and these two pollinators are choosing first this and then this. That is, different pollinators have different preferences. We have group of pollinators visiting the same plant, differing in effectiveness and differing in preference patterns. That means that probably if you have a type of phenotype are going to be visited by a type of pollinator that can be highly effective or very low effective. Okay? This is something that we had to identify very well in generalist system. Because if we go to the next dogma in generalist system, that is, there are spatial geographic variation in the abundance of different functional group of interacting organisms, what we found is the possibility for geographic mosaic of natural selection and coevolution to occur even in generalist system. This is an example of our study to test this idea done in Sierra Nevada with 8 populations differing or separating between each other about 5 kilometers. You see here the geographical position. And these are exactly the path diagrams like the one I showed you earlier. With fitness here, these are the different pollinator, these four pollinator groups. And these are the phenotypic, the blue square are the phenotypic traits. And you can see from this just fast view here is that there are some places, some population in which nothing is happening, nothing is going on. There are no significant selection in there. There are some populations that are called from a coevolutionary point of view, but there are some populations in which there are natural selection occurring. They are hot spots of coevolution. It's something that probably is more common than previously thought in generalist system. Then another mark of this type of system is that probably only some networks of interacting organisms can cause a strong selection. It's something that probably is very common in generalist system. We have systems in which there are the exact composition of pollinators belonging to a specific functional group, having a high effectiveness, good preference, and good abundance, probably in those exact population, there is a strong selection. In another population, probably selection is weak. That is, in a generalist system, you cannot see the evolution of traits everywhere, only in some places. And this is very difficult. That makes harder for ecology trying to identify the evolution of plant mediated by generalist interaction. But what we found really, even you can find here local adaptation to the subpollinators occurring in a specific population. There are some, I told you that there are some hot spots and cold spots. If you take the plant from the hot spots and the cold spots and transplant them between different populations, you find that the individual coming from in red, the hot spots, are visited more often by both the pollinator occurring in the hot arena, in the hot population, and also in the cold population. Plants from a cold spot probably is well adapted to the pollinator, not only occurring in that hot spot, but also pollinator occurring in cold spot. Okay, moving a little bit up and increasing the geographical scale, we can see even still at the mesoscale and mesoevolutionary scale, we can try to find if there are some kind of phylogeographic signal of the generalist system. And we explore that doing exactly the same that we did before, but in many populations along the entire geographic distribution of the plant in the Iberian Peninsula. These are about 48 or 49 populations of this plant in the Iberian Peninsula. What we did was just go to the population, record all the pollinators visiting the flower, try to see the plant trait of the plant from those populations, making the network, see if they are modular, trying to find the occurrence of multidimensional niche even at the scale of the geographic distribution. And of course, we found that the modular of population, here are population, are not individual anymore. And functional groups, there are more functional groups, because if you increase the scale, you are including more and more functional groups, is also modular. In this case, there are 5 modules. We found 4 at the scale of the population. We are increasing in 1 pollination niche here. We are add 1 niche. These are the genetic relationship. It's not phylogeny, it's just a genetic relationship between all the population, and trying to use the same tool than using normally with phylogeny, knowing that they are population, they are not different species. What we found is that there is no any kind of phylogeographic trend in the evolution of pollination niche. This is a bad news for people trying to see the relationship between the occurrence of a pollination niche and the evolution of the plant, because you cannot find any kind of phylogeographic trend. Probably that is really very common. Okay? But even so, what we found is that some specific niches were associated with some specific traits at the scale of the population, between different populations. Here there are only 4 selected traits, floral size, number of flower, and 2 corolla shape component. And you can see that, for example, for floral size, there are 3 niches, this one, and this one, that are associated, are more frequent in those populations having larger flowers. And 2 niches, the A and C, that are more frequent in those populations displaying a smaller flower. At the same with the other trait. Now, they are a kind of signal. But what's really happened here is that only some niches are associated to plant ecotype evolution. These are something that we are starting to call the hot niches. In this case, the niche that was mostly associated with the evolution of ecotype was this one. This one here composed mostly of long-tongue large bees, like for example anthophorid bees. Okay? Well, let's move a little bit up at the level of the macroevolution to see if the same pattern is found also at the level of the macroevolution. Just moving from many populations of Erysimum to many species of Erysimum. This is a picture showing the differences between different species of Erysimum in color, in shape. They are cruciferous. The chains in the phenotype is not as big as in another type of flowers or tropical flower, but you can see that they differ. Well, and we did exactly the same. It's exactly the same approach. We try to see if there are any association between pollination niche and some species, doing exactly the same, recording the pollinator, visiting different species. In this case, it was about, I don't remember very well, but about 50 species of Erysimum. And there are more functional groups, in this case 20 functional groups, because you are including species visiting by some very particular type of pollinator. And again, the same. What we found is that the species or clade-oriented network is modular. In this case, there are 7 modules. We are increasing the number of modules. We are increasing the number of niche. You are moving up. You are increasing the number of generalist niche you can find interacting with your group of study. And in doing a proper phylogenetic study, no phylogenetic signal, not able to identify the ancestor of the niches. You can see here is what's impossible to identify the ancestor. There are no phylogenetic pattern, clear phylogenetic pattern. This is because there are a lot of convergences and divergences processes. And this is because, and this is probably another generalization mark, diversification of this generalist system is occurring by something that is called in the literature wandering. That is the recurrent shift between very slightly different niches without dropping in the specialization dark side of the biology. Okay? But again, if we use the proper technique, the proper analysis, we can find some kind of signal. In particular, what we found is that some niches, this in particular, that is composed of those long-term large V's, the same niche than the study before, is associated with the color, the evolution of the color of the corolla. Remember that there are some purple corollas, and so, most of them are yellow corolla. The evolution of the purple is associated with this niche and also the shape of the corolla. The plant species, the Erysimum species visited by this niche are mostly purple with this kind of disymmetric corolla. This is the result of the comparative analysis. Then again, another generalization mark, 2 generalization marks are, one is very similar to the phylogeographic mark, is only some niches are associated to plant trait evolution at this level, the hot niches. If we want to know how generalist system evolve, we have to look for those niches and start studying those niches. And what is most important, no universal adaptation to pollinator occur in generalist system. Well, I decided to see if this is still happening if I go up and try to see what is happening at the level of the entire family. And what I started to do is to collect data on pollinator visiting as many Brassicaceae as possible, and also try to collect data on several floral traits, in particular corolla shape. Okay? And this is a study I'm still working on, it's going on. The study is mixed between my own data and the data that many people is just giving to me when, for example, they publish a network. I ask for the information, specific information for the Brassicaceae species in the network, and many people is just sending me the data. And I have been able to compile a data set with this amount of studies from this year. I started myself at this year, of course, but from this year to this year, and these countries. You can hear the extent of the data set. This number of individual of plants, this number of species. Brassicaceae has 5,000 or so species. This is about, well, it's a good proportion belonging to this number of genera, but what's most important, to this number of tribes that are the main lineages of Brassicaceae. There are 50 lineages. This is well sampled. It's very spread along the phylogeny of the Brassicaceae. Regarding floral visitor, this is the number of floral visits I had in the data set belonging to this number of taxonomic species or morphospecies from these families, and a huge number of functional groups. Not 20 like before, 44, including birds. Okay, that is something very. This is the phylogeny of the entire group of Brassicaceae, including my studies. That working with Brassicaceae is very easy because we have good species model within the Brassicaceae, like for example Arabidopsis or Brassica and other species. And the phylogeny of Brassicaceae is very well resolved. Using just the information published, I can even make a super tree of Brassicaceae and try to see the phylogenetic relationship of the species, and these are the network. Certainly the same way of see how Brassicaceae interacted with their pollinator, like the first picture I show you of the Erysimum with the 8 or 10 functional group. We all know that Brassicaceae has a very conservative floral bough plan. This is, for example, the chains of the floral shape of Brassicaceae in the morphospace. This is our genera. They are connected according to their phylogenetic relationship. That means that this is a phylomorpho space. These are the South American genera, the 2 North American genera I have, and the rest of all the genera are from Eurasia. You can see that, well, they are not very spread on the morphospace. But even so, what I found is that, again, this Brassicaceae pollinator network is again modular. These are the number of modules I was able to detect in this network I'm compiling. There are many, many modules. Okay? Remember that these modules are not produced by the sharp replacement of functional groups. They are just associated more frequently to some groups. In this case, for example, this module is associated mostly to overflies, carrion flies, and other species of fly. This module is associated to nocturnal moth. There are some Brassicaceae pollinated by nocturnal pollinator. This module is associated with the long tone large vid we have been following during the whole presentation, and so on. This is with bumblebees. There are some with ants, and so on. This module is a little bit outside of the whole network is associated with mites, spiders, as in prince's tail. Yeah, Brassicaceae are visited by almost any kind of animal. But again, you can find some signal within this mess. There are some modules in which you can find an association between the phenotype and the type of niche. For example, in particular, this module, that is this one, is composed of species having much higher, significantly higher floral integration. Floral integration is a cue to know that there are a lot of selection occurring in that species because everything is very well integrated. Remember, this was the modules visited by long-tone large bees, the most efficient in Erysimum, at least, pollinator. This module, visited by nocturnal moth, was also associated with plant species with very low, significantly low floral integration. Something normal, they are pollinated by nocturnal moth. They don't go to the flower just looking for the flower. They are just looking for another kind of floral trailer, for example, volatile. Okay, then, even here, with this huge diversity of interacting partner, you can detect, if you use the appropriate tool, you can detect some signal, and you can see that there are some association between phenotype and the multidimensional pollination niche that you have defined. Okay, moving up to the level of the, staying at the level of the macroevolution, I'm going to show you very briefly something I'm working with right now, that is the evolution even within the level of the species. Something that I have called for this presentation only the nano-evolution in generalist system. I'm doing this with a group of people, again, Paco Perfetti, Edu Narbona, that is floral biologist working specifically in floral color, Cristina Armas working on ecophysiology of plant, Adela Gonzalez in plant antagonist interaction, and Luis Navarro, that's another floral biologist. And the main idea behind this study is to see if this nice plant, that is a weed, Moricandia arvensis, this is a nice picture of the plant in the type of habitat in which it used to grow, is able to interact with different type of pollinator below the level of the individual. And this happened because, curiously, this weed has a very strange behavior. It starts flowering in the southeast of Spain, February, March, Mediterranean spring is mild, weather is okay, and produce the typical Moricandia flower. This is the typical flower on a Moricandia. You go to the Flora Iberica, you see how is Moricandia, and this is the typical flower. If you just Google a little bit about Moricandia, there are 8 species. These are the typical Moricandia flower. But this species remains flowering during May, June, July, August, even September, and so on. And during the summer, in the Mediterranean area, in the southeast, in the semi-arid and desert ecosystem of the southeast of Spain, the environment is really very harsh. And they start to produce this type of flower. These 2 flowers belong to the same individual. One in March, this in July. Exactly the same individual. These are the same individuals. If you take the plant to the lab and grow the plant in chambers under the theoretical conditions of spring Mediterranean and summer Mediterranean, you find that during the Mediterranean experimental condition they produce this type of flowers, and this is the same plant, just we cut the flower, chain of chamber, start to grow the plant in a chamber with a hot Mediterranean condition, and they started to produce white flower. If we do again the phylomorpho space just only with the relative of Moricandia, what we found is something like this. Remember, like the phylomorpho space of the whole Brassicaceae, only with the relative of Brassicaceae. And these are the flowers during spring, and these are the flowers during summer. That is, Moricandia arvensis is able to jump from one region of the morphospace to another region of the morphospace. The color is like this. This is reflectance. This is the purple color of this, and this is the white color of this. What is most important is that it's not only white, it's absorbing UV. What means that, for example, for a bee, the white flower is like a dark flower. Bees can see those flowers during summer. What happened with the interaction? Well, this is a network of within individuals. Its ball, its dot here, is one individual connected with the same individual. What I have done here, just for illustration, is to see what is visiting each individual during spring and during summer, assuming during spring is a different individual than during summer. And then see if the network is modular, how many modules there are, and connect the same individual between summer and spring. And what we found is that there are 2 modules, one with the individual flowering in summer, and the other with the same individual flowering, during spring, with the same individual flowering during summer. If you connect, you can see that there is even plasticity, not only in the floral shape, but also in the type of interaction they are maintaining. If we do exactly the same that we have done before along this presentation, that is analysis of modularity with the whole bunch of species related with Moricandia, what we found that there are about 5 niches. These are all the species only related with Moricandia. In red, I don't know if you can see, in red there are the other species of Moricandia belonging to this niche. And here, the Moricandia arbensis only including the information from spring belonging to the Moricandia niche. But when you include the information from summer, you see that there is a huge jump even in the ecological interaction to a completely different pollination niche. Moricandia is visited by completely different fauna during spring than during summer. Yes, they are flowering in March and in July. There are different pollinators going on there on the Mediterranean or semi-arid area of the southeast of Spain. Well, we can reproduce the two phenotypes experimentally. What we have started to do, this is just an ongoing experiment, but I'm going to show you just some preliminary studies, to produce the two phenotypes at the same time in the lab and taking them to the field. We did that the last year during June, and what we found is that if these are individuals, these are summer artificial individuals, and these are spring individuals. And they segregate in niche even when they are offered to the pollinator at the very same time. We have here one spring pollination niche composed, of course, of long-term large bees that are around even during summer visiting another things. I don't know really what, because there are not many flowers at that time out there, but they are visiting other flowers. And this is the summer pollination niche. They are, well, nothing is perfect. There are some plants just sharing the same niche. But what we are starting to see that even when they are offered at the same time, they segregate. That is, they belong to different niche, not only because they are flowering at different moments, the flower I mean, because the plant is flowering during the whole year, but also because they really have different floral phenotype. This is something that is very strange. It's plasticity in interaction. Moricandia probably is visited by two different generalist niche. It's the ultimate generalist probably. Okay, just to summarize what I have found, or what I want to give you some idea from my point of view how generalist systems evolve. At the microevolution, generalist pollinators are significant selective agents. Nobody believes that, or not many people believe that. I think that generalist agents are significant, generalist interacting organisms are significant selective agents. Generalist pollinators differ in effectiveness, preference, and frequency of interaction. This can cause a multi-specific geographic mosaic of coevolution, and also a multi-specific local adaptation. Generalist pollination niche may cause also the emergence of pollination ecotypes. That is the lower level of macroevolution. At the level of macroevolution, generalist plants diversify probably by wandering. Even so, there are some niches able to cause floral evolution, the hot niches, but no universal adaptation to pollinators occur in generalist systems. And the most important, from my point of view, is that generalist pollination niches are not syndromes. They are not syndromes. They are not caused by the sharp, abrupt replacement and functional growth of pollinator. It's not certainly, I don't want to replace the idea of pollination syndrome with this idea of pollination niche. It's something that is happening probably at a completely different level of occurrence. That's all. Thanks. This is the list of my collaborators. I have shown some of them during the presentation. And this is the long list of people from different countries that have sent to me some information on pollinator of Brassicaceae. If you want to have your name in the supplementary information or a very low impact botanical journal, just send me the data of Brassicaceae. I'm going to put you here in this list. Thank you.